So, in this short half hour, I want to talk about a little bit about something that's very confusing for all of us when we first learn about Ayurveda. And I want to talk about the distinction between Prakruti, or it's also called Prakriti, and Vikruti or Vikriti. And I will also take questions if possible. I will try to keep an eye on my computer and on my phone for any questions that come up as we go along. So I find that these sessions go really, really quickly, and so I'm just going to jump in. So in Ayurveda, there is the concept of an Ayurvedic dosha. We also call this, for convenience sake, our constitution, our dosha, or the sort of proper Sanskrit name is Prakriti or Prakruti. It's the same word, it's just that it is sometimes, because of one of the Sanskrit letters in it, that can be translated as Ri or Ru. It is said both ways. Prakruti translates loosely as nature. But since Sanskrit is a language that is rich with meaning and nuance, depending on the context, Prakriti or Prakruti can have slightly different meaning. In this case, it means nature or your nature. So when you are born, you have a certain ratio of the doshas. Your unique ratio of the doshas is your Prakruti. So when I was born, my ratio of the doshas, which are Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, was Vata 2, Pitta 3, Kapha 1. When I was born, my ratio was Vata 2, Pitta 3, Kapha 1. The way I describe this, I'll talk just very briefly about the concept of Prakruti, the basic concept, because it can be very confusing. So if you think of having 3 empty pots, and you think of filling one pot with all the qualities or characteristics of Vata in that one person, then for me, that Vata pot is about 2/3 full. So Vata is 2 for me. Then there's the Pitta pot, and you fill that with all the qualities, characteristics, attributes, or in Sanskrit we say gunas of Pitta, and my pot is full. So I am Pitta predominant. And then Kapha, a 3rd pot, mine is only 1/3 full. I only have 1 part Kapha. Now not everybody is a 1-2-3, 3-2-1, 2-3-1 ratio. So this is just for convenience that I am using this. Someone might be, 4-4-1. I mean, 1, 2, and 3 adds up to 6. Not everyone's dosha, not everyone's Prakruti will add up to exactly 6 parts. But for convenience, this is often how we express the Prakruti with my teacher, Dr. Vasant Lad. So all that to say that for me, I am Vata 2, Pitta 3, Kapha 1 when I am born. So that means that this ratio is always the ideal amount of each dosha that I should have throughout life. However, that is impossible because in the winter, everyone will have more Kapha because that is the Kapha season. It is more wet, it is more cold. And then in summer, everyone will start to accumulate Pitta, because there will be more hot and more sharp with the bright light. So what we're always trying to do with our Ayurvedic lifestyle and diet and practices from the Ayurvedic perspective is we're always trying to get back to the ratio that we were at when we were born. A common misconception that happens is people will say, oh yeah, I don't have much kapha, so I have to get my kapha up. It doesn't work like that. You don't want to get your kapha up. If I'm born with kapha 1 part kapha, I want always to have as much as possible or be working toward maintaining just one part Kapha. The reason that this misunderstanding comes up is because if you look, for example, at Vata and Kapha, most of their qualities are opposites. So someone who is Vata predominant might say, I need more Kapha. It's kind of true because Vata is dry, light, cold, mobile, and Kapha is heavy and slimy, unctuous, and cold. So they're both cold, so you don't really need more Kapha, right? Because if you needed more Kapha, that would include more cold, and you don't need more cold. So what you really need is you need the opposite of the qualities that you have a lot of in order to stay at that level. Going back to my example, if I am Vata 2, Pitta 3, Kapha 1, and if my Pitta pot is full to the top, then every summer where there's a bunch of Pitta in the environment, I'm going to accumulate Pitta because I can't help it, because unless I have to go out in the sunlight, I'm going to get hot. And then my pot starts to accumulate, my Pitta pot starts to accumulate more Pitta, and it overflows. And that's what we call aggravation. Accumulation and then aggravation. So at that point, I now have a Vikruti, a present state of Vata 2. I had Vata 2 before. That's my Prakruti as well. And then Pitta for me at that point in the summer, because I already have a full pot and it's starting to accumulate, aggravate, overflow, I now have maybe 3.5 Pitta and Kapha 1. So now that's what's called my Vikruti, because my present state is different from my Prakruti. We can have a Vikruti that's the same as our Prakruti, and that's when we feel balanced. When those two ratios are the same, then we are balanced. But this is very rare. It's very hard because life is happening around us. There is the seasons, there's our environment, there's the food we're eating, there's the relationships we're having, there's the climate that we live in, there's our time of life, there's our activity, physical activity or any kind of activity, and every one of these aspects of life has qualities of Vata, Pitta, and Kapha in some ratio. And so we're always accumulating, we're always taking in, we're always being filled up with the gunas or attributes of the three doshas from all these aspects of life and environment. So we can't usually help but have a Vikruti, a present state, that is different, at least a little bit, and sometimes a lot, from our Prakruti, which is our nature. So back to that point where many times people will say, a Kapha person, someone who's Kapha predominant, it's most common with Kapha and Vata types that a Kapha type person will say, I need more Vata. And a Vata type person will say, I need more Kapha. And it's kind of true, but we don't usually express it that way because it can create a misunderstanding. So again, I don't think I quite finished my point there, so I'm going to go back to it. Because Vata and Kapha are both cold, a Vata person never really needs more Kapha. They just need to introduce the opposite qualities to the qualities that they already have in abundance. And it just so happens that the qualities that are the opposite of Vata are most of the qualities that are the nature of Kapha. However, they're both cold. So if we say, I need more Kapha, when what we really mean is I need more slimy and unctuous and more water, like when a Vata person says that. And what they really need is they need more static and stable quality. They need more slimy and unctuous quality to counteract mobility and dryness. but they don't need more cold, so they don't need more kapha. They just need more of the attributes or gunas that are the opposite qualities. They introduce opposite qualities because that brings us back to our basic principles of how to re-establish and maintain balance based on an understanding of our Prakruti and our Vekruti, which is we either reduce our exposure to the same qualities that we already have a lot of. So if I am Pitta predominant in the summertime, I wear a white hat with a brim because I want to reduce my exposure to the sun as much as possible. If I am Pitta in the summer and I want to use the principle of like increases like to maintain health, then I need to do my best to protect myself from accumulating any more Pitta attributes because I already have a lot. I can also use, sometimes you can't protect yourself, right? Sometimes you have to go out in the sun, and even if you wear a hat, maybe you have to be out there all day. So then you also wear sunscreen, right? And Pitta is hot. So if I have to go out in the sun anyway, and I do everything I can to protect myself to try to prevent accumulating more heat from the sun, but I still start to accumulate it, then I can use the second principle. Opposites decrease each other. I can drink cold water. I can eat cooling foods. I can rest more so that I'm not generating heat from physical activity. So I'm either using like increases like or opposites decrease each other to guide my activity, my diet, my behavior, or anything that I can. Right? So again, I'm repeating this part to really drive home that when a Vata type person is aggravated, they don't need more Kapha. They just need more of the opposite qualities to the ones they already have in abundance. Just because most of those qualities are qualities of Kapha doesn't mean they need to increase Kapha. That's, like I said, it will create a misunderstanding about how Ayurveda works and how we apply the principles if we speak about it this way. Over time, it's likely to create a problem. Because as a Pitta person, I wouldn't say I need more qualities. I could say I need more qualities of Vata or Kapha, but I would only mean like the cold quality, right? Because Kapha and Vata don't have they don't really have qualities that so much that Pitta needs. Pitta just needs to introduce, other than the cold, other opposite qualities. So just wanted to clarify that point because it is a common way that people talk about Ayurveda. They talk about bringing up their Kapha or bringing up their Vata. It's a very difficult concept to get our heads around. Because in Ayurveda, what you don't want is to accumulate any more of the doshas than you already have naturally. You want to stay at that natural amount. So let me talk a little bit more about the difference between Prakruti and Vikruti and the misunderstandings that happen there. If you do have a question, feel free to pop it into the comments and I'll start looking there for questions, and I may not be able to answer them all depending on how many of you put a question there, and I may also decline to answer certain ones if I don't think there's value in answering it for everyone involved. But that doesn't mean that you can't ask a question about your specific Prakruti or Vikruti, because other people will probably have your Prakruti or Vikruti. So do feel free to try asking a personal question, but if it has other elements in it that are very, very, very specific and particular to you, like I take this herb and I'm this dosha or Prakruti, what would I, that might be too specific. So, but do feel free to pop a few questions in there. So when we do a questionnaire to find out our Prakruti, there are a few challenges, and we can do a questionnaire to find out our Prakruti and our Vikruti. But again, it's very easy to misunderstand how to use the questionnaire to do that. When we do the questionnaire the first time, we want to try to answer the questions based on the qualities that we have always had, the way we have always been. And the challenges in that arise due to several causes. One is that, respectfully, we may not all be that self-aware. We just may not have thought about, I don't know, do my eyes look fiery? You know, or or we might not have looked at our skin very carefully compared to others. And it doesn't matter if your skin, you know, what color your skin is, what your ethnicity is, or your origin is, because every different color of skin has undertones of a sort of opaque whitish, which is Kapha quality, a pinkish or reddish with moles and freckles, which is a Pitta quality, and then the sort of more yellowish or even sometimes grayish or ash, sort of ashy sort of undertones, which is a more Vata quality. So it doesn't matter what color your skin is. When you look at other people that have the same color skin as you, if you look carefully and you take your time and you look over time, you'll see that no matter the color of your skin, there are these different shades in every ethnicity. However, I'm pointing to two challenges that come when we try to answer a questionnaire. One is that we may not have thought when we're in the presence of other people with the same color skin as us or that come from the same background as us, we may not have looked at their bodies or their hair or their skin and noticed how ours compares to theirs. We may have, but we may not have. Or there might be certain aspects we haven't looked at all. So if I haven't, been interested in that aspect of other people, I may not really know where I sit on the spectrum. Do I have a narrow, small frame? Do I have a medium-sized frame? Or do I have a big frame, a large frame? And that's in terms of sort of our skeletal frame. And so it can be difficult to know where we sit on that spectrum. Now, even if we have looked at other people, we may not be assessing ourselves accurately. It's not uncommon, especially for those who identify as female, to look at their bodies and think that they are bigger than they are. I remember speaking with some students of mine who I was teaching just little tidbits of Ayurveda to, and one woman said, "Oh, I gain weight really easily." And I looked at her, and respectfully, it was hard not to roll my eyes because I'd known her for about 1.5 years by then. She'd been my student, and I thought, my heavens, you have been the same size in the 1.5 years that I've known you. And not only that, but even compared to other people in the class, it was so obvious to me that she was probably like a combination of Vata and Pitta, not Kapha, which is a larger body frame and tends to gain weight more easily. So, and then Pitta gains weight more easily even than Vata. But in her mind, she gained weight easily. But we don't know who she was comparing herself to, right? I mean, we can sometimes compare ourselves to when we're younger. Like I would say now that I gain weight a lot more easily than I did 10 years ago or 20 years ago. But I know, because I've been studying Ayurveda for 20 years, that I don't gain weight easily compared to Kapha type people. So yeah, it's really hard to know where you sit on that spectrum. So the first time you do the questionnaire, you want to find out your Prakruti, your nature. And we have the challenge of both seeing ourselves clearly and seeing ourselves in terms of where we fit within the full spectrum of possibility. So those are challenging things. What can help when you're doing a questionnaire and you want to find out your Prakruti is to invite someone who knows you well to give you some honest feedback, maybe about where you fit, especially in terms of those questions that have to do with our physical appearance, because those are the ones I think where, either due to a lack of exposure to a lot of other people or not paying attention to those qualities in them, or due to our own slightly, you know, slightly skewed perceptions of ourselves, we can make an error there, and then we can misjudge our Prakruti as a result of misjudging where we fit on that spectrum. Now, to do your Vikruti, you want to do that questionnaire again. Some things won't change because your skeletal frame is not going to change throughout the course of your life. But that brings me to the other point, which is that questionnaires are very rudimentary ways to find out our Prakruti and Vekruti. Traditionally, you would go to a Vaidya, an Ayurvedic doctor, and the Vaidya would look at you, would touch you, would talk to you, would take your pulse. And with all of these things, and when I say touch you, I mean they would do palpations and that kind of thing, just like you would get when you go to a physiotherapist, chiropractor, and RMT. So they would use all of these, you know, sight, talking to you and getting a sense of your personality, probably some kind of medical history that they would take, your current issues, and then also, also, like I said, taking your pulse, and then they would know your Prakruti. I mean, a very skilled person like my teacher, Dr. Vasant Lad, he would know upon sight because he's been doing this for so very many years. However, he would confirm what he suspected by doing all these other things. So to just take a simple questionnaire and think that you can confidently confirm your Prakruti, it's very challenging. When I first started learning about Ayurveda, I read the book Prakruti, or I think it's actually called Prakriti. I'm trying to remember the name of the author. He is a Westerner, but he was I think the first person to get a Bachelor of Ayurvedic Medicine and Surgery in India. And his name is escaping me right now. But if you search Prakriti, or I can put it in the comments later, I'll just put a link in the comments to that book. And I read that whole book, and I observed myself for a couple of years. And when I first was doing this and had encountered Ayurveda, I really couldn't decide whether I was Vata predominant or Pitta predominant. And part of the reason for that was that that my Vikruti was Vata. So my present state, I was in a Vata aggravated state. I had a very light diet. I was eating vegan food at the time. I was young. I was extremely active and busy in my life. So I was at my lowest weight. You know, one of the times in my life that I was at my very lowest weight. So those things sort of really led me to, and I also had constipation as a regular condition that was a part of my life through childhood and through early adulthood. And so all these things led me to think that maybe I was Vata predominant. However, I did over time start to understand myself within the full scope and spectrum of possibilities and understand the difference between Vikruti and Prakruti. And I realized that no, I'm Pitta predominant, Vata secondary, and I have a Vata Vikruti most of the time. Because Vata is the Vikruti, it's the present state that many of us have most of the time. We are most of us Vata aggravated, not all, but many, like a majority, probably over 50%. Because if you think mobility and you think dryness, then you think of our diet and you think of our lifestyle. It's nonstop. Your attention is changing from place to place to place. You're moving from place to place to place. We're eating fast food. We're eating processed food. These things make us drier. So many people have a Vata Vikruti. And also the nonstop, the mobility of the mind, because we're just moving from place to place to place to place with our mind, on our devices, in our lives, taking care of people. So it's not uncommon for people to think that they have a Vata Prakruti when they have a Vata Vikruti, and Vata is more likely the secondary dosha. Another thing I want to say, because we're getting close to the end, and I'll try to answer your question, Erica, as well. And if I don't answer it, Erica, in the video, I'll pop something in the comments. But one of the lost my train of thought there. Something about Prakruti, Vekruti. Oh heck! I wanted to say something. Really important there. I might just end up popping it in the comments because I lost my train of thought. That's my Vata aggravation right now. So I was saying that many of us live with Vata aggravation. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Another tricky one, and it tricked me for years into studying Ayurveda, is that someone who is Vata Kapha, so someone who has a Vata predominance with a secondary Kapha, or a Kapha predominance with a secondary Vata, or who is Vata Kapha dual doshic, can look like a Pitta. Because you have the Kapha, biggest frame, slow, static, easygoing, and then you have the Vata, sprightly, slight, mobile, and when they mix together physically, they look medium-sized. So they end up looking like a mesomorph or a Pitta type person. The trick is, are they hot? Are they hot or are they cold? Vata and Kapha are cold. So if you're a medium-sized person and you relate as through your whole life being more on the cold side compared to other people, there's no pink in your skin, moles, freckles, you don't have anger as your default emotion, you're probably not Pitta, you're Vata Kapha. Some combination of the two, very close to each other. But you might look like a Pitta in terms of size and shape. And then the other thing is that Kapha is slow to learn, but then remembers for a long time, and Vata is quick to learn, but forgets easily. So a Vata Kapha type person can also look like a Pitta in the sense that Pitta has a very sharp mind, a very quick mind. So can someone with a Vata Kapha combination, because the Vata is super quick and the Kapha is slower but retains it longer. So that quality of capacity to learn, or not capacity to learn, capacity to remember, or to put learning into action and that kind of thing, they can look very similar. But if you're cold, that's a big sign. And if you've always remembered yourself as being colder than other people, like if you don't like to sleep with the window cracked open and the cold side of the pillow and your feet out from the blankets, then you're probably not Pitta predominant, because Pittas are hot. And even now I'm 47 years old, and even through my whole adult life, still very warm. Like right now I'm actually sweating in this flannel, even though it's only about 6 degrees outside, and I don't even really have much heat on in here. So anyway, Prakruti, Vikruti. Prakruti is your nature. It's what you're born with. And you always want to be trying to get back to that ratio. It can be very challenging to figure out exactly confidently what your Prakruti is from a questionnaire, because the questionnaires are just a few questions and there's so much open to interpretation in those questionnaires, right? The way something is worded, maybe it doesn't work very well for you. Maybe you don't understand where you are on the spectrum just because you haven't been thinking about it for 10, 15, 20 years and observing others and so on. So that's very challenging. Vikruti, that we often mistake our Vikruti for our Prakruti, but it's our present state and not our always state. So I do Ayurvedic consultations. I have just finished school to become an RMT, registered massage therapist. Just wrote my provincial board exams. I'm waiting for the results. And I would be happy if any of you want to have an Ayurvedic consultation, just add me as a friend, send me a message on Messenger, something like that. And we can figure things out. I will put my website in the comments, and Erica, I'll also answer your question about autumn tiredness. Actually, I'll answer it now. For anyone who can stay a minute or two longer, I'll answer this question now and any other questions that pop up in the next few minutes. But just to appreciate our 30-minute time limit, I just want to wrap up the main body of the topic. And I really hope that my slight bit of rambling has resulted in a little bit of a clearer understanding regarding the challenges of figuring out your Prakruti and distinguishing it from your Vikruti. There's so much more to say on the topic, so perhaps what I'll do is follow up with my next student development session, and I'll talk about what it means or what it looks like to use the two main principles of Ayurveda to reestablish balance once we do know our Prakruti and Vekruti, and how we can reestablish that original ratio that we were born with without further upsetting the balance. And that can be especially challenging for certain combinations of the doshas. So I'll do that on the next student session that I do. So as far as autumn tiredness, Erica, good question. I think one of the things that I want to offer to remember is that while our contemporary, so Erica has asked in the comments, is there an Ayurvedic way to counteract autumn tiredness? Well, traditionally, we were allowed to move a little more slowly after harvest. And in our contemporary lives, we're expected to keep the same schedule regardless of the time of year. And that can be really challenging because the days are getting shorter and your body is responding to that. Now, I suppose there are a number of ways that we can counteract autumn tiredness, but they'll be so dependent on both our resources and our day-to-day life. So one thing I would suggest is that if we do have a life where we've become more sedentary, then obviously, if it's an option, doing more activity, a little more activity. And depending on when that tiredness arises, so for lots of us it's late afternoon or it can be early evening, can you take 5 minutes and get on your mat and do two full sun salutations? Maybe. Ginger tea. That's my next one. Ginger's the catch-all. It's so great. So hot tea, ginger's vibrant. It stokes Agni, our internal fire. And I would suggest ginger tea as sipping on hot ginger tea throughout the day. If you can't get up out of your office chair, even, just stretching more often, setting your alarm for, ooh, did you hear that pop? Setting your alarm for every hour and doing some stretches, or even I like getting up and jumping up and down and just shaking everything out, jumping up and down like a bunny. I used to do it in my yoga classes and just shaking everything out. And then I am not prone. I'm a very big introvert. I can stay indoors for long periods of time, so it's really hard to get me outside. But one thing I've really noticed while I was doing my very intensive training for massage and then studying for exams was that if I did actually get my butt up and outside, even just to walk around the yard and check on my garden or my plants or whatever, I would just feel renewed and refreshed. So change of scenery, if possible, and away from a screen. However, let's appreciate that autumn is a time where things are getting colder for those of us in the Northern Hemisphere, and days are getting shorter, so your body will have an adjustment period. So I'm just going to give those 3 suggestions for now. So more frequent activity, whether that means fitting in sun salutations on a mat, standing up and jumping up and down, or just moving around in your chair. Getting outside, taking a few breaths of fresh air, maybe a brisk walk around your house or around your workplace, or ginger tea, or all 3. So that's what I'll suggest. So we're 5 minutes past time, and thank you so much for those of you who came. And if you do have further questions on this topic, please pop them in the comments, and I will put the book in there, Prakriti. It's not a very big book, but it is a very helpful book because it talks about the doshas in a very Western way. And I'll pop my links in there, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you for joining me.